Welcome, members. It's now 5 p.m. In the absence of the chair and the vice chair of the General Services Committee meeting tonight, do I have a nomination for a member to chair tonight's meeting? Councillor Johnson.
Councillor George Cockshaw, please.
Thank you, Councillor. Do we have a seconder?
I'm happy to second that.
Thank you, Councillor Morrell. Councillor Cockshaw, yes, please feel free to take the chair's seat.
Thank you, members. Apologies, I have to move up here. I can't quite see otherwise. So, right, just moving swiftly on to item 1. Apologies for absence. I've received apologies from Councillor Kent, with Councillor Shinnick substituting, and also from Councillor Jeffries, with Councillor Johnson substituting, as well as apologies from Dan Fenwick. And I understand Councillor Muldowney is on her way and will be with us very shortly. Is there any other apologies for absence? No. Right, moving to item 2, what everyone wants to talk about, devolution and the local elections. I'll just hand over to Dr. David Smith, who will introduce the paper slightly before going to members' questions.
Thank you, Chair. I will be brief because obviously the important issue is the discussion that needs to take place between members. General Services Committee is being asked to consider and take a view to advise the Cabinet with regard to 2 specific issues. One is the commitment to government's priority programme for devolution, and the second relates to the in taking that action, the proposal to request that the Secretary of State postpones the local elections, which are due on the 1st of May. The government's priority programme for devolution has been presented in the English devolution white paper as the opportunity for particular regions to take advantage of this government's approach to devolution. Behind the issue of devolution is the government's commitment in its mission statements around growing the economy, providing new opportunities for jobs and better employment, to promote the development of skills and to improve both planning and public transport. Those functions are contained currently within mayoral combined authorities, which in the white paper are generically referred to as strategic authorities. And the government in the white paper is seeking expressions of interest in being involved in a priority programme to be at the forefront of that devolution agenda and, as I say, deliver growth and economic prosperity in the regions under consideration. However, tied to the opportunity around devolution is the prospect of local government reorganisation, which relates to those regions with counties and districts, so 2-tier arrangements as they're referred to. And it also includes, where there are 2 tiers, those unitary authorities that are considered either too small to be sustainable or who have very substantial existing financial difficulties. And both Thurrock and Southend in the Essex context fall within that ambit. So as part of the priority programme, if the council was minded to go forward with that, along with Essex County Council and Southend, we would also be entering into a period for local government reorganisation into a number of unitary authorities, for which the white paper makes reference to the population size that it would like to see, but it intends to give more guidance during sometime in January on the criteria to apply to local government reorganisation. So it's very early days. I've been to more meetings in the last 4 weeks on this than I've had hot dinners. So we're very much at the beginning of learning about the intentions behind the white paper and absolutely at the foothills of understanding the practicalities of delivering all this. But there is a clear question that the government's posed that we have to address by this Friday, which is whether we want to enter into the priority programme with the implications set out in the report on that. And based on whether the Cabinet later on decides to do that, the government will then decide which areas who've applied to go into the priority programme will be taken forward. As I said, Chair, the Cabinet is responsible to make the decision as the executive powers, but I know the Cabinet wanted the advice of General Services Committee and to take that advice into account in making its decision. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Smith. As members, any member want to start? Comment at all? No? Councillor Muldowney?
Yes, so I'm minded to, I'm in favour of going forward for the priority programme. Obviously, there's going to be a lot of concerns and there's a lot of uncertainty because, as Dave said, it's moving rapidly and there's a lot of details that we're not party to at the moment, but I think the basic idea of devolution is something which I've always supported, and I think local government reorganisation has to go alongside it to achieve the outcomes that the government wants to achieve from this and to free up the regions to drive economic growth. But obviously it will be a huge challenge to take 15 different council structures and rearrange them into just 3 or 4 unitary councils. That's an enormous job and an enormous challenge, but I do think that the basic principle is right, and I think also, speaking from a finance point of view, this could be an opportunity for Thurrock to be joined with support from the other councils that are in the district to actually get out from, maybe there'll be a path through to get out from under the debt that Thurrock residents are currently labouring under, although we've got a plan in place. Obviously, we've known that that's not a total solution to our debt situation. So I'm hopeful. Obviously, we're going to need to iron out a lot more details. There's going to have to be lots of discussions with government and other councils. But generally speaking, I'm in favour of moving forward and committing to the priority programme. Thank you.
Councillor Spate, you indicated.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I've got a few comments that I would like to make on this matter, and I have a sort of long statement that has been very kindly put in as Appendix 3, which is based on, I took a consultation with the 6 colleagues in the independent group, because I felt it was really important that before I came here and voted or recommended as myself, that I took into account everything that they have to say. And if anybody wants to read that, rather than me going through it all, it is down on the website as Appendix 3, I believe. And as I say, I'm grateful to Matthew and his team on Democratic Services for allowing that to go in there. Just saves going through. I think what 6 of us within our group are absolutely in support of making the application to cancel the elections. And the reasoning behind that is that we do not believe that a change of governance in whatever shape or form it may happen in May is in the best interests of continuing the improvement path that has already been started. I mean, you can take a view, and there are many varied views on how effective the improvement path has been, and how effective we are likely to be in the years that follow in tackling the massive amount of problems that we've got in Thurrock. And of course, not least, the biggest one of all, which is the hundreds of millions of pounds of debt that will continue to dog this council and may well continue to dog whatever authority eventually takes its place. But we're sort of looking for, I won't call it a short-term game. What we're saying is we've had a degree of stability. We've made some starts on some improvement pathways. And I think it would almost be inevitable that were we to have elections in May to a council that probably, and they would be 4-year appointments to a council that probably won't exist in 2 years. It doesn't seem to make much sense to me, and it'll be an expensive exercise. So we think, or 6 of us think, that it is right and proper that we do move down this path. And I'll talk about the Councillor Massey has some concerns and he was quite, you know, he supported a lot of what we said, but he has some reservations, significant reservations, and so says, and I think it's appropriate I read his view out, is that I'm unable to support the cancellation. Basil and Council has already said it wants a merger, but they won't take on a penny of Thurrock's debt. A lot of the white paper was on new unitary councils rather than existing ones. I worry we will get delay and nothing will change within a year. So he basically wants to know who we're likely to be merged with. Any merger is likely to take more than a year. So will the 2005 elections be relevant for the next 24 months? And then he comes to the point about Thurrock residents are already angry that they are being denied an election after so much in the recovery plan was placed in having these elections all out, 49 new councillors in May. And that's a very valid point, that part of our recovery plan has been based on that. And now we're throwing that out as we've thrown a lot of other things out with the bathwater. And so he says, having supported all out elections, he personally finds it difficult to move from that position. And I absolutely share that dilemma, but my balance on weighing the good and the bad is that it will be better not to have the elections, and my thinking behind that partly is that there's been a lot of use of the word democratic and undemocratic. Well, the election that was brought about or set to be happening in May, if you think about it, was entirely undemocratic itself, because I, for example, was elected by the electorate of Stamford West to serve for 4 years. That was my plan. That's what I intended to do. And they supported me and mandated me to be there for 4 years. And clearly, there are a number of councillors, I think there are 16 who are in that situation. There are also 16 who were elected the year before who would expect also to serve for another year at least. To carry out what they were elected for. So if on the one hand, you know, are we not usurping democracy by actually having these elections in the first place? Elections that were called by effectively the unelected commissioners. If it was based as a recommendation from within the BVI report. So we've actually got people who haven't been elected to have anything to do with this authority, who've been put in post, dictating to us to have an election. Well, if you call that democracy, then maybe we're a third world country. So I'm not sure that the argument about democracy and undemocratic actually stands. And clearly, there were 17 councillors elected this year, and I dare say a great number of the electorate who voted for them didn't understand that they were only there on a 1-year mandate either. So I think there's a lot of difficulty around this whole situation. I would make the point that I think communication on this whole issue of devolution, both from government and from all the authorities that have been involved, has been incredibly poor. And I understand it's complex. I understand there are many roads that could be taken and whatever. But I find it really interesting that this afternoon I got a couple of messages from members of staff of this council who were briefed this afternoon by our chief executive, and the comment, the person sort of came out confused and concerned and unknowing as to what was going to happen. So, you know, we're struggling to tell people what's going on and whatever. So I think whatever form we have moving forward, we really have to think about how we message and connect with our people in our borough. I think there is a huge disconnect with this council and with the residents of Thurrock at the moment. And I can see why a lot of people are incredibly angry. And a lot of them immediately jump to the conclusion that, okay, it's just 49 trying to hang on to our allowances and look after things that we want to do. And we're not getting a great press out of this as councillors. But nevertheless, as I say, my personal opinion is it's the right thing to do. Just to say, as a direct quote from one of the people that came out of today's meeting, who basically said that their opinion of the reason that we're having these elections is because the government want to stop reform. That's an interesting perception of what went on. And there is great dissatisfaction with the Labour government, which is another reason why we don't want to have the election in May. And I think there is certainly substance to both those arguments. And then it says, at a meeting just now, we were told that the elections could be postponed for years, our jobs could be tupied over to another employer, and the residents of Thurrock will have no say in the decision. Maybe at your meeting tonight, you could ask for more consultation with residents, more information, so the long-suffering residents of Thurrock actually get a say in what's happening to them. And I think there is real substance in all of those points. I've waffled on a little bit there. I think it's incredibly complex, incredibly difficult. And what I have said to the person that I spoke to this afternoon is that come what may, if we do not have elections and I am still the councillor for Stamford West, because presumably until we have a new election, Stamford South won't come into play. And that's another can of worms, the whole boundary situation that's been kicking around and has been left to well beyond the 11th hour. But I certainly would intend that regardless of whether the government then came along and said, okay, we're now going to have another election in 2027, to whatever the new authority is, or whether there's a revamped Thurrock Unitary Authority or what, I will resign my seat at the end of my 4-year tenure. Now, whether that means there'll be a by-election or not, but I will not go along, I will not go further on personally than the amount of time that I was elected to in a democratic election. As I say, the majority of the group within the non-political Alliance of Independent Councillors by a majority of 6-1 do support going to the government on Friday.
Councillor Johnson, and I'll come back to you, Councillor Muldowney.
Please you come back to me. Thanks, Chair. I've got no real feelings against the priority programme and devolution in general. I actually think it's a good way forward. Cancelling the elections goes against everything I believe in as democracy. But I do have to say, if what looks like is virtually a done deal that Thurrock won't be as it is in 2 years' time, then it's probably not worth putting further expense on the council that doesn't have a lot of money for more elections. As Councillor Spates said, the communications on this have to be very good so that the residents don't have all those underlying feelings, and staff that, you know, councillors are just doing this or the government's just doing this for their own good. I would actually be surprised if it will be ready in May 26, to be perfectly honest. So I am very concerned that this could go on longer still, but reluctantly I would vote forward for cancelling the elections.
Thank you. Councillor Muldowney.
Thank you, Chair. I think in terms of Councillor Spate saying that we're going to all-out elections on the basis of unelected commissioners telling us that's what we have to do, I have to disagree with that. I believe all councillors unanimously voted in favour of the recommendations from the BVI report, and one of the recommendations from the BVI report was the recommendation to go to all-out elections. So it was clearly democratically decided that that was the best course of action to go forward. However, having said that, I do agree with most of everything else that Councillor Spate said. I don't really think that cancelling elections next year makes sense. what is the point of holding expensive elections if we're only going to exist as a council for a couple of years? We've also had an enormous amount of elections over the last few years. I can, you know, some twice a year because we've had general elections as well. And over the last 3 years, I think the whole of the council has been re-elected at some point or other. Maybe not. Probably Councillor Gledhill hasn't stood again for re-election. No, but we have had 3/3 of elections, so definitely the whole council has been re-elected over the last period of time. And obviously we have quite a few councillors who were elected newly last year and the year before, whose term would have been cut short. So I do agree with Councillor Spate on all of those points. And obviously I'm in support of us going to government and asking for the elections next year to be postponed.
Thank you, Councillor Warren. Then I'll come to you, Dr. Smith. That's okay.
Thank you, Chair. Before I start with my statement, and I've written a statement to make sure that I captured everything that I did want to say, I do need to pick up that maybe to Councillor Spate that I'm sure it's just not Conservatives and Labour that have gone to you about their concerns about losing their seats to reform. I'm certainly, you know, not standing against, and I'll always go to the ballot box on my reputation as a councillor, and I'm certainly not scared of any of those that want to put their name against me, should and when we get to elections. And so that aside, I'm sure I just didn't like that he just made it about two parties and didn't enclose any of his own group in that. But for me, I understand and I appreciate the concerns of the residents and some members, you know, around the whole devolution and local reorg agenda. And then added into that, we've now got the postponement of the May 2025 elections. And to some concerns, these are really, really valid. And I want you to be assured that, you know, I've really not taken it lightly. And I've taken off my political hat. This isn't about who voted for this and who didn't vote for that and who's frightened of this and who's frightened of that. This is a huge, huge agenda for us. And all councillors, when we are elected, we have to make these decisions on behalf of our residents. And when required, we need to do what is best for the long-term future and for the place that we call our home. Thurrock is our home, and we have to put Thurrock at the front of this. No party politics, no saying you said, we said, they said. And this is one of those decisions where we need to get it 100% right, because it will shape Thurrock as a place forever and a day. Over the last couple of months, I've dedicated significant amounts of my time to studying the implications of devolution and local government reorganisation. I think that it's a bold move by the new government, but one that I welcome, and I'm looking forward to working with our political partners across Essex and at times much wider than just Essex. I want to talk about devolution and not just the elections. Devolutions will give councils and communities a much bigger say in the decisions that affect where we live and for many, where many of us work too. This is something that we should all welcome. Should Cabinet agree to this tonight, there really is no denying that we need to work at pace and to ensure that we have a solid proposal submitted in September. That is just 7 months away with a whole load of work to do. And if we do not have this proposal ready in time, we will not get the best deal for our residents. And then some will say that we have failed them. Some would say we failed them again if we don't get it right. We have to get this right for our residents. What we do not need to do is halt this work while stopping for 6 weeks for elections in May and elect councillors for what we know is a council that will no longer exist as early as May 2026. So rather than entering into an election cycle, one that comes with a financial cost in excess of £300,000 and the limitations of purdah, Let us focus our resources and energy on securing Thurrock's place in the conversations that will shape the lives of our residents for generations to come. I want to finish on the positives of the decision. What excites me most is the immense potential these changes hold for our borough and its residents. Through devolution, we have a once-in-a-generation opportunity to shape our local infrastructure and reimagine our transport systems, two areas that have a profound impact on the quality of life of everyone here in Thurrock. With these factors in mind, I wholeheartedly support the Council's commitment to entering into the Government's priority devolution programme and local government reorganisation. This decision is not about avoiding democracy, but about prioritising the long-term interests of Thurrock and ensuring we seize this unique opportunity to shape our future. Thank you, Chair. That's all I have to say on the matter.
Dr. Smith.
Chair, just for the sake of clarity, given some of the comments by members, can I just repeat what I said earlier, that the decision to defer the election is a decision of the government, not a decision of the council. The council is the applicant and will have to demonstrate in its application why it wants to defer, and obviously some of the reasons have been raised by individual members already. But the decision is made by the government, and there is a parliamentary process that has to be gone through in order for that to be decided.
Councillor Watson.
Thank you, Chair. So the decision to postpone the May election is really a significant one, and not one that I've took very lightly either. And I have really thought this over, especially in terms of my residents. The thing is, my residents are my judge, jury and executioner when it comes to an election, and to be honest, I'm there to represent them and what's best for them as well. I'm not frightened to stand up into an election. It really doesn't bother me, but I just want to represent the residents well. Devolution is very key to this, to Thurrock Council. It's a great opportunity that we will have on going forward in actually getting money into the whole of Essex, not just sitting into Thurrock. The reorganisation has to run side and side. We can't do this on its own or entirety. And until we need to have that faith in our politicians as well as our chief execs across, they will bring up the best deal possible. We can't sit here and we can't pretend that we know the answers to the questions that are unknown at the moment. However, what I will say is that I am in favour of postponing the May elections. And one of the reasons behind that is that Thurrock has to be front and centre all the way in these negotiations. And by putting a 6-week purger in place, that is effectively 6 meetings we will not be represented at on any base at all. That will put us on the back footing. This cannot happen. This has to be Thurrock there at the helm, along with Essex and Southend. So for that reason, and for my residents, and for all the questions that I hold in, is it right or is it wrong, I'm going to vote in favour to postpone this election on this occasion.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Shinnick.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I've got to say I agree with cancelling the elections next year, and going forward I agree with devolution. But within that, I do think we need to get things right for our residents of Thurrock, and also thinking of the staff at the council in the bigger picture. We need to be mindful the way we go forward with that. So, if we get this right, I think it's exciting times for Thurrock, so I'm in favour of it.
Thank you. Has any other councillor got any comments? Councillor Worrell.
Thanks, Chair. I think that, we have to hear that, if there's been a staff briefing today and straight away coming out of that, Councillor Spate's been contacted. I'm sure that many of us will too. We have to find a way of making sure that when we're making key decisions, should you know, this happen, and should decisions be made to go down devolution and we get accepted, we have to accept, you know, we're asking to be accepted. It's not a given yet, you know, nobody's told us that we're actually getting this. You know, these are what we'll be asking to be part of the priority programme, that we need to make sure that whoever sits on a working party outside of this organisation and within this organisation first, that we do capture the views of the 49, that we do capture the views of the residents, and that we do capture the views of our staff, who many, 80% are residents here in Thurrock. So we have to make sure that it does work much wider than just outside of somebody going to a meeting or 2 or 3 people going to a meeting. It's got to capture the views of people. So I think that there is something to be recommended to Cabinet to make sure that there is a cross-party group set up outside of this, should we be accepted. So I would, you know, it has to be, of course it will be Cabinet decisions and everything will go back and via a Cabinet decision, but there has to be a mechanism in amongst this to make sure that, you know, it's the views of the many.
Councillor Modoni wanted to comment.
Yeah, I just wanted to say a little bit more about devolution because, you know, obviously we're in a position here in Thurrock, just to use an example, where we can hardly put a bus service on. You know, people in a lot of parts of the borough at the moment can't actually get to hospitals very easily if they have to use public transport. The move to sort of an elected mayor and the powers that could be devolved to that mayor would mean, you know, that we could properly take public transport back into public hands and have a much better functioning public transport system. There could be much more control over skills and education agendas, because we need to reskill our residents and prepare them for better paid, properly paid and proper jobs, you know, not just relying on the gig economy, and also get people back into work. We all know that not having a job produces very bad health outcomes. One of the best things that you can do for people's health is to actually provide work for them. So there are so many things. There's transport. Obviously, I think it will make it easier to get to our net zero ambitions across the country and tackle climate change. And we're a huge area of economic development. Essex as a whole is underperforming in terms of economic growth. And I think if we get it right, this could actually unlock a lot of prosperity in the area, could provide jobs for those who need them, like good, well-paid, proper jobs, and would be of benefit to Thurrock residents. I know there's a lot of uncertainty at the moment, and I absolutely share that. But having taken the Christmas break to think it through, it's not that much more uncertainty that we were in already, where we had a plan but we didn't have a solution for our financial situation. And if this works, if we can get it right and it works, then it would be considerable benefit to us in trying to get out of the toxic black hole of debt that we currently find ourselves in. So just wanted to say that bit about devolution. And moving on to local government reorganisation, I think it will be much easier for a council of 500,000 population to be able to deliver services. Our population, I mean, Councillor Howden's spoken about this before, you know, maybe we're a little bit too small. It's very difficult financially to run a council of this size. So although I don't underestimate the huge challenge that's ahead of us if we get accepted onto the priority programme, I think that in the long run it is the right thing to do, and it's the best thing to do for Thurrock and for our residents. And I'm sure all of us here all of us here cross-party will fight for the best possible outcome for Thurrock in terms of who we join up with, and in terms of unlocking the economic potential of our area. Thank you.
Oh, Councillor Spade.
Yeah, just briefly, and I agree with most of what's been said there, but what we are in danger here of doing already is putting the cart before the horse, and certainly Dr. Smith was quite right to say that all, you know, at the end of the day, all that Cabinet will decide this evening is that we then go and ask the question, and it was interesting. A couple of councillors have said I vote for that. Well, we're not actually voting for that. We're voting to ask the question. But then you look at what lies ahead, and this is why I think it is important that we don't have the paraphernalia of an election in the middle, because in a very short period of time, there's going to be an awful lot of things I think will happen very, very quickly. For example, the role of the mayor. I don't think many people understand the way a mayor would work in Essex, because I haven't got a clue, because it's not, you look at the mayorships that we've got, you look at Manchester or Liverpool, you know, the big urban areas, the metropolitan areas where mayors appear to have worked reasonably well, but yet in Essex, for example, if you think one of the reasons that Thurrock Borough Council was created from a UDC, and there'll be a date somewhere on the wall there, but it was in the late 1990s, I believe, was because it was generally felt by all concerned that Thurrock didn't get a very good shout from those people in Essex County Council who were more interested in about as what we genuinely call the sort of leafy boroughs of North Essex. And you've still got that dichotomy to deal with when you get a mayor, because Thurrock's needs are unique. So I think, and the other interesting thing, I do think some of the functions, for example, from what I've read of the Police and Fire Crime Commissioner will actually go to the Mayor's office now. I actually think that's a good thing, because I've not got a great deal of time for what we're seeing coming out of Roger Hurst's office or his predecessor. I think that can only get better. But equally, I think, as was touched upon by my colleagues, things like transport, being, you know, having a wider base for transport will work and will improve things, because we tend to look at the very small things here that affect us, and we know how important communication is for all the ringroll we got when we chopped a few rural bus services. But again, I suspect, you know, across the whole of Essex, it's such a big place, we've got to see how it works. I think the real thing, and this is where we've got to look at what is put on the table for us to debate, and why I think it's important that we cancel the elections, is because we're going to look very hard and very deeply at a number of options that I suspect will be tabled for us to consider. Who we're going to partner with, why we're going to partner with them, and what the expected outcomes of that are going to be. And that is where our work and our focus will probably be for the best part of this year, which I think just reiterates why we should put the elections aside, because you're going to have all that, and at least at the moment we've got an experienced council, councillors, 49, most of them now have had at least a year, will have had, you know, the best part of a year of learning the job. They don't have to learn on the job anymore. They can sit down, they can reflect, they can work on experience. They've built communications with their wards and their communities, and they're not going to change as well, because don't forget, you know, if we did have elections in May, then councillors would have different wards to represent. And that is another reason I think it's a good idea to put it back for a couple of years, and then we'll see what happens. But yeah, I think really good points have been made tonight, but I really do think we also have to, you know, we don't make any assumptions about what we're going to get. What we should all assume is that we will all work in a non-political way for the benefit of Thurrock. That's why we're here.
Councillor Watson.
Thank you, Chair. The suggestions and recommendations come from Councillor Warren about cross-party workshop. I think that really needs to be embedded. And at the same time as whatever communication goes across the 49, the staff need to be told at the same time, so there's no ambiguity between both of them what's happening. It's so crucial that we also get that message out to our residents, so our comms need to be really on point on this, on every single thing. Be as transparent as possibly can. And then when we do enter into whatever the mayoral is or the mayoral arrangement will be, then once again, that will be coming up as an election in 2026, as well as like possibly us. And then we can go from there. But we just need that working group to put in really, really quickly, because I'm very sure that we've only got a few months before you're going to go and give our submission on what we want to do.
Thank Thank you. I was going to say towards the end, to put that as a recommendation from General Services table on, Matt, to say that set up a working group to help advise Cabinet on matters of devolution and local government reorganisation if our application is successful. As 1.4, can I have a seconder to Councillor Worrell? Councillor Johnson? Thank you. Is there any other councillors wishing to speak before I make my own comments? I've sat here very quietly all evening, allowing. I am really not comfortable with. There's two matters here which is really important to actually understand. Devolution and local government reform are in parallel. They are not combined together. And by conflating the two issues together, we are setting a really bad precedent and creating a much more complicated scenario for ourselves to work in. Admittedly, I worked in the last bid in an MP's office on devolution, and we were not very happy with the previous plans of devolution when I worked for Sir James Dadridge, and I worked with him and I didn't quite see how it worked. In those years, in the last 3 years, yes, I've slowly come around to the idea of devolution, actually the opportunities we can have here in Essex, but that really means there is loads of questions sitting beside this, is what does this look like? We're a mayoralty, great, are we having one combined authority? Are we having two? One elected mayor, two elected mayors? Like we've got to, at the moment, we're at very early stages, and quite happy if we get to 26 and we have an answer and we have one mayor, one combined authority, that's how we'll proceed, I'll be very happy with. But that doesn't then impede on the fact of what we do around elections and what we do for this authority. Local government reform isn't going to be done in 2 years. I cannot foresee at all a means to which a new unitary authority will exist, any number. We have our expression of interest to go in by the end of the week, but we still don't know how many we're going to have. Are we having 5? Are we having 3? Basildon has decided as a district it's going to make the map itself, which I think is a bit laughable. But that is the inherent issue we are having. I can't feel comfortable myself by saying, we are going to postpone all our elections for maybe 12 months, maybe 24 months, maybe 48 months. Even if we do have a new authority with boundaries which may not be the boundaries of existing authorities, we may have in Thurrock, Basildon, West Horndon, Benfleet, Canvey may be an authority of no Billericay. It doesn't necessarily mean these new boundaries will just merge from existing authorities. The Boundary Commission will come in. How are we meant to do this work in 2 years? How are we meant to recruit staff? How are we meant to go through this process to deliver the services? We're going to have a shadow authority. That shadow authority will operate for 12 months. We elect a shadow in 27, 28, it may take an executive role, but that means we are still an executive authority making decisions in 2020, beginning of 2028, with councillors elected in 2022. I'm not that comfortable with that at all. When we tried to look at changing election schedules last year, around 24, to say, look, if we've, besides the change of government, there was no appetite for that. It was wrong. It's wrong. We can't do that to create stability or to create things. That's why I find it uncomfortable in some of the statements made. It's the practicalities of this process I can't foresee the government doing in this time frame. There is so many underlying complicated issues here. Buckinghamshire, we took proposals in 2016. 2018, those proposals were finally agreed. 2018 until 2020, that was 2 years, and that was COVID. In the end, there was extenuating matters there. But this is a process that isn't done and dusted in 2 years, though it won't exist. I'm foreseeing we are still here until 2028, 29, really, even if there is a shadow. That is a meaningful term for councillors to be elected when I was elected in 2022. At the current basis, I'm up for election in May. That's 3 years. That's a reasonable term for me. And that it's just these fundamental issues. Tonight, I'm going to vote in favour of for devolution because these matters shouldn't be made jointly together and hand in hand. But the 1.2, 1.3, I will be abstaining on because I'm not comfortable with doing that. But that comes down to a personal view. I've found it very uncomfortable the last few weeks trying to ratify my own brain to understand where are we actually going with this. But I just cannot foresee the mechanisms of government working this quickly. I really do not understand how we are going to get a brand new authority that we're going to be able to elect on with new boundaries, new services, new footprints in this 2-year period. I just think it's unworkable. And Councillor Massey, I completely agree with the questions when you in the statement. I thought I was really going to be in a minority of one, but I know all councillors are not going to be comfortable with it inherently, and it will come down to the judgment of how they perceive what will happen and how much faith they have. I just don't have faith that it's going to be done in 2 years. But I've long wanted local government reform. Don't say I'm scared of it. I wanted local government reform in 2018, and with ASLA, I wanted a South Essex authority with a GDP larger than Belgium. Like that was the opportunities there is here. Thurrock is inherently too small, as Councillor Howden and Councillor Woodoney have said. We do not make financial sense to exist. But I don't want to be rushing the programme, and then eventually we're making executive decisions but not facing the electorate. That for my own personal view, I'm just not comfortable with that. But I appreciate councillors will be up to their own judgment. But this is for an application, obviously, for ministers to decide, and it will be up to the minister to view what, on the balance of probabilities, what option he will take. Fantastic. If there's no other comments, I'd say we move then to the recommendations. So for reasons set out in the report, the General Services Committee is asked to consider and endorse recommendations to Cabinet. 1.1, to commit to the Government's priority programme for devolution, enabling the Council to focus on working with neighbouring authorities to develop the devolved strategic authority alongside local government reorganisation. All members agree? Agreed. 1.2, to agree that as a consequence of participation in the local government devolution priority programme, the Leader and Chief Executive approve a letter to the Secretary of State asking to postpone the elections to be held on the 1st of May 2025. Members for 1.2? Members against? Members abstaining? 1.3, if 2.2, 1.2, depending how it is presented, is agreed, where is the agreement between the Council or one or more partner authorities to submit a joint letter to the Secretary of State? All members in favour? Members against? Members abstaining? 1.4, Matt, are you happy for me to read out in principle the rough wording and we can go through to set up a cross-party working group to help advise Cabinet on devolution and local government reform if should the application be successful? Members agree? Thank you. If there are no other matters to be discussed, this concludes the business of the meeting this evening, and I declare the meeting closed at 5:47 p.m. Thank you.